Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
Is the goal of reducing the federal workforce by 10% wrong, or just the way the Trump administration is going about it? And what about that 5-bullet email? Some perspective now from retired federal manager Abe Grungold of AG Financial Services. And you've been retired a few years, but not all that long, and you still know people retiring. How does this all look from the standpoint of a happily retired federal manager?
Actually, Tom, it's been 3 years this month that I've been retired. It's been wonderful, but since the new Trump administration has created all these executive orders that are affecting HR policies and employees, my business has just gone crazy. It's just amazing.
Well, what's your thought on this reduction? Because the old-timers like us have seen other reductions in the federal workforce that were substantial in number.
Yeah, so let's talk about this 10% reduction that the new administration wants across the federal workforce. Let's talk about that. So President Trump and Elon Musk come from the business world. And when Amazon and Walmart and all these companies want to do a layoff or reduce the workforce, they do a 10% across the board. And that's where this idea comes from. Now, they're implementing various programs to try to do this 10% workforce reduction. But let's go back a little bit in history, Tom, to the Clinton administration that also did the same thing. They reduced the federal workforce by 423,000 employees. Now, I don't know if that was 10% of the workforce back then. I was, somewhat of a new federal employee, but certainly 423,000 employees is a significant number.
Yes, and they did it after a 6-month review. It was the National Partnership for the Reinvention of Government, and there was the National Performance Review that they went through agency by agency. And my recollection is when that was going on, a lot of the federal employees supported the effort because they were engaged in helping find what maybe the government didn't need to do anymore.
So, yes, let's talk about that program back with the Clinton administration. The program that they did was different than what the Trump administration is doing now. The program back then was to have a plan, and the plan was to, review the workforce and to quietly implement the reduction of the federal workforce by contacting every federal agency and giving them, each agency, the full discretion of how they were going to reduce the workforce. And they went to the toolbox and they implemented the federal buyout. They implemented the VERA, the Voluntary Employee Retirement Authority. And unfortunately, they also implemented the reduction in force policy by closing offices.
And they also instituted the A76, or revived it, really, review of who could do government functions more efficiently, the government or contractors. So a lot of that work ended up being contracted out.
Yes. I mean, honestly, Tom, I don't remember, federal contractors in the workforce back in, my early years of federal service. I'm sure they were there, but certainly the Clinton and Gore administration took some planning, and each agency really gave it some thought of what would be the best method to reduce the workforce in their agency. And I remember at the time I was with the VA, and we had a very small office, and one guy took a VERA. The other guy, unfortunately, they forced him out. And that was basically the 10% of our office. And,
right. So we've seen this rodeo before, but maybe with just different bulls.
Yeah, they did it methodically. They did it, in some sort of a quiet method not to panic the workforce.
We're speaking with Abe Grungold, retired federal manager and now owner of AG Financial Services. And you also have been watching this business about the it went away. Now it's back agency by agency. And weekly emails about what you did last week and give us 5 bullet points to your manager or whatever.
Right.
That seems weird.
The 5 bullet points is really just a method to verify your position. In my personal opinion, and Tom, again, this is my personal opinion, I don't think there's anything more than that. They want to verify that the employee is working. And the problem is you have a lot of employees, unfortunately, who are missing in action. They're supposed to be home or wherever, teleworking or at their desk, and they're just not there. And then you have some employees who terminate from federal service. They've been forgotten to take off the payroll, and they're still getting paid. I've seen that happen. And you also have something which are called ghost employees. You have a federal contract, and the contract says that you're going to provide 4 employees on the federal contract, but only 2 of them are actually working. So this 5 bullet points is just simply a way to verify that employees are working. But there is somewhat of a little bit of a problem in doing that. You have employees who are on annual leave. You have employees who are on sick leave. You have employees who are on military leave or some other type of leave that would not really allow them to check their emails. So those employees somewhat fall through the cracks of this idea.
And I wonder if there are people, names on payrolls or staffs that managers aren't even aware of. They could be vestigial names. They could be people have left. We also got emails here from people who got married and their name changed, but their old email address still works, even though they've changed to a new email, and therefore they exist twice in some sense.
Yes, there are a lot of these various exceptions, and exceptions do exist. But I think for the most part, what the 5 bullet points is just simply to verify that the employee is working and that they are there.
And is it, in your opinion, such a bad thing to maybe write a couple of them and see what happens?
No problem. I mean, you could just write a few bullets of what you're doing during your workday. I wrote some emails. I had a couple of meetings regarding the new project. I am planning something, going on training next week. I have a meeting coming up. Just anything. It doesn't have to be sensitive to the mission of your agency, just some details of what you're doing during the week.
Or if you work for the IRS, I cleared 57 returns, or I found 3 fraudulent claims, or I found 27 mistakes,
Exactly. If you're someone who's in payroll department, you say, I processed, 8 employees. I sent out 157,000 checks, whatever. You doing your payroll functions from week to week. Put it in a couple bullets, send the email.
It reminds me of that apocryphal story about the mop pusher or the broom pusher at NASA who said he's helping to put a man on the moon many, many years ago. Now probably most custodial services are contracted out by NASA. But you could say if you worked at NASA, well, I helped put somebody on Mars, or I helped discover a second universe.
Sure. Actually, Tom, there is something that I'd like to talk about in what is the new administration doing right and what are they doing wrong? And the good thing of what they are doing with this reduction of federal workforce is they have offered a very generous deferred resignation program, the very first program they issued, which got the attention of 75,000 employees who were probably going to retire this year, next year, and it gave them a big incentive to hit the submit button. And many of my clients, I shouldn't say many, about 6 of them, took this offer. And it's an excellent offer to be given 6 or 7 months of severance pay and then retire at the end of the fiscal year. That's a good thing. But what's the bad thing is going on is they are doing these reduction of workforce at a warp speed. They're going too fast from agency and agency, and they're using a broad brush when they're doing it. And when they're doing this, they're affecting employees who are critical to the mission of that particular agency. And for example, I believe it was the energy department. They had to bring back 50 employees who were protecting the material that is, in some sort of deep cave somewhere. And they're making some mistakes. Yes, they're correcting them, but they need to take a breath. They need to take a breath and look at these employees that they're letting go and say, which ones are really critical to the mission of this agency? And I think they're just moving a bit too hastily when they're doing this.
All right, so Abe to Doge, slow down and take a breath.
Yes, exactly.
Abe Grungold is a retired federal manager and owner of AG Financial Services. As always, thanks for joining me.
Yes, thank you for having me on, Tom.
And we'll post this interview at federalnewsnetwork.com/Federal Drive. Subscribe to the Federal Drive wherever you get your podcasts.